融聚智慧，方能融创价值。融你我，融无限。江苏银行。
本节目由江苏银行冠名播出。现年74岁的英国《金融时报》副主编、首席经济评论员马丁·沃尔夫呢，是一位资深的经济学家。他1942年出生于英国伦敦，1967年呢进入了牛津大学学习，先后取得了古典文学学士学位以及经济学的硕士学位。1971年他加入世界银行，1974年到1981年期间，他担任世行的高级经济学家。1987年起就职于《金融时报》，1990年呢出任副主编，1996年起成为首席经济评论员。2010年至2011年期间，马丁·沃尔夫曾经担任英国银行业独立委员会委员，少见的以媒体人的身份参与了金融危机后英国极为核心的金融监管改革方案的制定。2012年，英国出台了金融服务法，撤销原来的金融服务局，将大部分的监管职能纳入了英格兰银行。同时呢，在英格兰银行的内部设立了金融政策委员会，赋予其宏观审慎监管权，以确保英国的金融稳定。近年来呢，中国面临的金融风险也在不断的增加，现行的一行三会分业监管体制也暴露出职能不清、效率低下、宏观审慎监管缺位的诸多问题，加速中国金融监管改革的呼声日益高涨。今年的早些时候，马丁·沃尔夫在接受财新时间专访时，就重点谈及了英国金融监管改革对于中国的借鉴意义。
I want to shift to financial regulation. China, with this recent round of stock market turmoil and various other wealth management product issues, seems likely to shake up its financial regulatory architecture in March. So UK obviously abolished FSA. Some say it's a political decision. For China, right now, it seems the regulation of banking split between PBOC and CBRC is a bit unclear. Yeah. What's your suggestion from UK or US experience?
Well, my view is, one, there is no perfect system. All systems have advantages and disadvantages. Mm-hmm. Two, you can make all systems work. So to take the developed countries, Canada has a separate regulator, mm-hmm. and it works fine, okay? We had a separate regulator, and it didn't work very well. I tend to think regulatory culture, determination to regulate properly, is more important than the precise structure. Mm-hmm. Nonetheless, and this would be my third point, I have slowly come to the view, but I think the argument in general for combining regulation into of financial markets and above all of banks into the central bank makes a lot of sense. And the main reason for that is, first, they are going to be the institution that helps banks anyway, so they need to know very well what the condition of the banks is all the time. And second, they have to be responsible for what we now call macroprudential policy, namely the oversight of the financial system as a whole. And it's very difficult to do that if you don't have oversight of the individual institutions. So we made the decision, our government made the decision to put our Financial Services Authority under the Bank of England. And of course, in the US, the Federal Reserve is the most important regulator. It's not the only one. Mm-hmm. So I would have thought the arguments for merging the regulatory authority within the People's Bank, which is an excellent organization, one of China's best institutions, economic institutions, is quite strong. I'm not saying it's overwhelming. It depends very much on the framework. But if you've got a problem of regulatory coordination, there's a sort of problem of trying to work out who's in charge, there is a case, I think, for putting everything under the People's Bank.
Mm-hmm, that's right. People's Bank actually promoted it, recently announced this policy of macroprudential assessment.
Yes.
Another risk for the financial sector is the kind of asset management products,
Yes.
which falls in both the realm of CBRC and CSRC.
Yes.
A lot of turf sinking or regulatory void has been in here.
Yes.
So it seems really there is a case for a integrated, or say, like what UK did before the crisis, one central bank or one regulator.
Well, you have a lot of regulators. I mean, there are three main regulators, as you point out, as I understand it, the People's Bank, CBRC, and your financial regulator. That's certainly one too many, in my view. Now, we have two. Essentially, we have two. We have the Bank of England, which incorporates the Prudential Regulatory Authority, which is the banking regulator. And then we have the Financial Conduct Authority, which does look at markets. And there are aspects of markets that the market behavior that the central bank doesn't have to be concerned with. But I do agree with you. We now know a lot about shadow banking. We had big problems with it in the US, and you've had big problems with it in China. Very similar problems.
Internet finance.
Yes, yes. So, I am now clear that the shadow banking sector can create all the risks like banking. You know, it's very similar risks. This being so, they have to be treated from a prudential point of view in the same way as the banking sector. So the central bank has to have, otherwise you control the banking sector, you look after it very carefully, and then all this stuff comes up in the shadow banking sector and it destroys everything. So it does seem to me that the prudential regulation of markets should be with the People's Bank. Now that's a complicated relationship, but I think it makes sense.
今年的10月1号呢，国际货币基金组织启用包括中国人民币在内的新的特别提款权货币篮子。作为人民币国际化的重要一步，人民币汇率改革的进程一直以来都备受关注。2015年的8月11号，央行宣布调整汇率中间价的定价机制，减少对于人民币价格的管制，使人民币汇率定价机制更加的市场化。然而，在811汇改之后，随之而来的人民币持续贬值，外汇储备大幅下降，也引发了市场的担忧。对此，马丁·沃尔夫又有着怎样的见解呢？
Exchange rate, which is a heavily debated topic nowadays, seems the short-term difficulties are mounting. Tactically, do you think China should really kind of go to a kind of more fixed, formal kind of basket pack, or do what Russia and India did in the past years, completely go into a fully floating system?
It's an immense dilemma. I mean, it's unbelievably difficult set of questions. So first of all, where I think China is today, as I read, obviously, it doesn't look at the moment that what China is doing can be sustained. And the main reason for that, I think, is the rate at which the reserves are falling, which suggests a very, very considerable capital outflow. Now, I have no idea whether this is permanent or temporary, but there might be reasons to suppose that it is permanent, that there are many, many Chinese companies and individuals who want to take money out, repay debt, and this could go on for a long time. Now, I don't know, there's a big debate to be had about how large the reserves should be. And I think they're now too big, so I have no problem with their falling towards $2 trillion or so. But in the longer run, China can't continue with this outflow of reserves. And that would suggest, unless something changes, that the currency has to fall somewhat. But of course, if the currency fell somewhat, that could create quite a big negative shock for the rest of the world, when the rest of the world is very fragile. So that's a big management problem. And I think it's clear that the Chinese authorities don't want the currency to fall a lot. So there's this reserve management, the flow management question. And what is the alternative to letting the currency go after you stop using the reserves? Well, it's to impose capital controls on outflow, and that would reverse to some extent the reforms. Now, I think actually imposing controls on the outflow might well be necessary. And this is linked to the second point, which is the way in which the capital account is liberalized has to be integrated with exchange management. And that is, of course, integrated with the whole financial reform of the Chinese economy, which is also integrated with the whole reform of the Chinese economy. The financial reform is a central element in the reform process. Now, I think the reform process is a multi-year process, and so it seems to me the reform of the exchange rate system and exchange controls all have to be part of this, and I don't expect it to be very quick. I don't expect this to be very quick. Now, on the immediate situation, I think there is a case for being more formal about the basket peg. I think it was very reasonable to go to a basket. They had to get off the link to the dollar, particularly when the dollar was so strong. That was perfectly reasonable. It's probably quite a good idea to have a somewhat more formal peg, and it's certainly a very good idea to be a bit clearer about what policy is than it has been. But it's going to remain very difficult. And let me make one final point. My own view, and I think it brings me back to where I started, is China can't go to a free float until it has a pretty well liberalized capital account. The two have to, not completely, but to some extent they have to go together. And you can't have a fully liberalized capital account until quite a lot more financial reform has occurred. Now, I know the People's Bank thinks if you open the capital account and you liberalize the exchange market, that will force financial liberalization. I understand that argument. They want to use this as a lever to force financial liberalization. I understand that, but it's risky. And the important point is it's not only risky for China because you can get into problems, it's also risky for the world. China is an enormous economy. Its savings are far and away the biggest in the world. If we mismanage the opening of the Chinese capital account and the exchange rate system, it could create quite severe financial crises and adjustment crises in the rest of the world. So it has to be done cooperatively. It has to be done with agreement among all the major players on how to do it. Everybody knows in the end China should have a freely floating exchange rate with an open capital account and a reformed financial system. But my view is that can't happen for quite a few years, perhaps many years, and the path has to be very carefully organized. At the moment, it's not a disaster. I'm not very worried, but there are going to be very many bumpy moments.
What do you think is the chance this year of China or the world pushing through kind of enhancing the role of SDR in international monetary system or reduce reliance on dollar?
I think the chances are next to nothing. I'm actually quite in favor of monetary reform, and I'm in favor of modest monetary reform and radical monetary reform. But the reality is there is no consensus behind a massive expansion of the SDR, massive increase in issuance. There's no chance the US would agree to that. The Congress would go crazy. And in the end, the decision to make the dollar the dominant currency is a sort of market decision in the sense that everybody wants to use the dollars. I said for many, many years, I said to the Chinese authority, why are you buying all these dollars? Why are you accumulating so much reserves? You're just making the dollars more important. But why did the Chinese authorities do this? Because they thought it made them safer. And the people around the world hold dollars, business people. So because it's accepted as international money, and it has been the dominant international money for 70, 80 years. This will not change quickly. It will change very slowly. But I am very happy that the Chinese authorities have raised the question, because the question is a really important one.
在全球经济低迷的背景下，增长承压的中国经济受到世界的高度关注。据官方数据显示，从2012年1季度开始，中国 GDP 的增速跌破8%，在7.5%附近徘徊一段时间之后呢，就一路下行。在2015年3季度跌破了7%，今年上半年跌到了6.7%，经济增速明显的处于下行轨道。然而，对于目前中国官方公布的 GDP 数据的准确性，海外一直存在一些质疑的声音。马丁·沃尔夫表示，对于中国这样一个庞大、复杂、正在经历着转型的经济体来说，经济增长的总趋势是毋庸置疑的。然而，增速是否如数据显示的那般平稳，依然是有待考证。
Ken Rogoff mentioned China's number is too smooth. A way to overcome this kind of maybe psychological problem is to go back in time to revise the data as US or UK did for every 5 years. Is it really the case?
The smoothing, it's exactly the same point. China seems to lower growth in good times and raise growth in bad times, and it gives the impression that there are no cycles. there are no real cycles. So basically, China used to grow at 8 to 10%, and now it's gone down smoothly to 6 or 7. Now that's very, very implausible for a very large and complex economy going through a big transition. The idea that it's much more stable than any other economy in the world is very implausible. We just can't believe it. And then you never revise the numbers. So, and we revise them all the time. And remember, I mean, it's obviously, Britain's economy is much smaller. It's clearly large, on balance, it's probably easier to measure. So if we have to change our numbers all the time, we find it very strange China doesn't. And so there is a lot of skepticism. And then again, as I said, you report them so quickly. So taken together, I think there is a very reasonable level of skepticism about the figures. I should add that I actually believe, looking back over the last 35 years since reform and opening up, 37 years since reform and opening up, that the overall picture of fast growth, is roughly right. I'm not questioning the broad story, but the details from year to year, the composition of the growth and so forth, I think one can be reasonably very skeptical about.
Right. Is the lower growth figure generally watched by the market as something positive or negative? I think people have this recognition that maybe it's good for reform, but when bad numbers coming out, market tumbles or drop.
Yes, that's a very complicated question. So you're asking how the markets view it, and the market isn't one person. It's always very difficult to interpret the market. The market is a complex phenomenon. I can only really give you my interpretation of how it seems, and perhaps that's some market elements. So I tend to think that the best way of assessing the true growth rate of an economy in the long run is the growth of consumption. So, because, a lot of investment can be wasted. If it's and I think a lot of investment at the moment has been wasted. And if you create wasteful investment, it's like throwing it away. It's not real value added. It's just money. It's just product that has been created that has no value. So, and consumption growth has actually been more steady than investment growth. So, and if you look at consumption growth, the slowdown is much smaller than the growth of the economy, because investment used to grow so incredibly fast. So I think there's actually more stability in the economy if you look at consumption than is recognized. So I think we should be more confident in China for that reason, because consumption continues at a reasonable rate. However, there is a reason for looking at the GDP figure for the following reason, there are two reasons why we might be nervous. If GDP growth is very fast, it's probably because investment growth is very fast. And when investment growth is very fast, debt will tend to grow more quickly, because a lot of it is debt financed. And we're a bit concerned about the rate of growth of debt. So from that point of view, slower growth is a good thing. But at the same time, this is the other side, investment is the most import-intensive part of China's growth. And investment has driven so far a lot of China's commodity imports, particularly iron ore and copper and all the rest of it. So if investment slows, this has a big negative effect on important parts of the world economy, particularly commodity exporters. So GDP growth composition, particularly the composition of growth, is important in both positive and negative ways. And that is obviously related to the ups and downs of growth, because, as I've already mentioned, in a boom, investment tends to grow incredibly quickly, and in a bust, investment tends to grow more slowly, which is what we're seeing now.